Good morning, Virgo. Something just broke open, and I do not mean that metaphorically. I mean it in the most literal, most visceral, most impossible to contain sense of the phrase. Something that has been held under pressure for a very long time, managed carefully, kept beneath the surface through sustained effort and deliberate restraint, has finally found the crack it needed. And what came out of that crack is going to shock everyone who witnesses it, including the person who caused all of this in the first place. Stay with me, Virgo, because what I am about to walk you through is not just a story about someone defending you. It is a story about truth that has been compressed for too long, finally expanding to its full size. And that expansion is something that nobody in this situation was prepared for. I want to start by setting the scene because the context matters enormously here. And I think understanding the full picture is what makes this reading as powerful as it is. There has been a dynamic in your life, perhaps ongoing for some time, perhaps more recent, involving people talking about you in spaces you were not part of. Conversations happening without your presence, without your ability to represent yourself, without anyone in those conversations who was fully committed to making sure the truth about you was the version being circulated. You have felt this, even without specific confirmation of exactly what was said or exactly who said it. Something in your awareness has registered that your name has been in mouths that did not treat it with care. That stories about you have been moving through certain circles and forms that did not fully resemble reality. That the version of you being discussed in your absence was missing significant pieces of who you actually are. This is the foundation of what is now breaking open. And let me speak to the person who has been doing the gossiping, because their energy is very present in this reading, and I want to name it clearly. This is someone who operates most of the time from behind a particular kind of mask. The mask is not obviously sinister. It does not look like obvious hostility or open dislike. It looks like something much more socially acceptable than that. It looks like concern, perhaps, like someone who is simply sharing observations, expressing worry, relaying information that they frame as important for others to know. The mask is convincing. It has been convincing for a while, long enough that the people around this person have generally accepted the framework they present, which is the framework of someone who is reasonable, who is trustworthy, who would not have any reason to distort the truth about you for their own purposes. But something happened recently that cracked this mask. Not a subtle crack, a significant one. One that has allowed the people who were accepting this person's version of you to see, for perhaps the first time, the gap between the mask and what is underneath it. And when they saw that gap, their response was not quiet. I want to speak to the person who is now going off, because this is the most immediate and most significant energy in this reading, and they deserve their own full examination. This is someone who has had their eyes open for a while, someone who, even while the gossip was being circulated, even while others were accepting it at face value, was registering something slightly off about it. A quality of too convenient, or too one-sided, or too carefully framed to be simply neutral observation. Something in this person's gut was telling them that the story being told about you did not add up completely, even when they could not point to exactly what was wrong with it. And then something became visible that confirmed what their gut had been telling them. The specific piece of information or the specific action or the specific moment of exposure that did this is different for different situations, but the effect is the same across all of them. The thing this person had been sensing, the wrongness that they could not quite name, suddenly had a name, suddenly had evidence, suddenly was impossible to continue setting aside in favor of giving the gossip spreader the benefit of the doubt. And the response to that confirmation was immediate, and it was fierce, and it was the kind of fierce that comes from someone who does not simply feel intellectually certain that they are correct, the kind that comes from someone who is genuinely, personally, indignantly offended on your behalf. I want to describe what this going off actually looks like, because I think the texture of it matters. This is not a composed, measured, carefully worded correction. This is not someone calmly pointing out the inaccuracies in the narrative that has been circulating about you and suggesting a more balanced perspective. This is someone who has reached the end of their patience with a particular person's behavior and is no longer making any effort to manage how their response appears. They are speaking directly, loudly, in the sense of unmistakably, even if the volume of their actual voice is controlled. They are naming things, specific things, behaviors that have been observed, inconsistencies that have been noticed, the gap between how this gossip spreader presents themselves and how they actually behave. All of it is being laid out in a way that does not leave much room for the gossip spreader to wriggle out of. And the people around them, the ones who have been witnessing this, are shocked. Not because they think this person is wrong, but because of the completeness of it. Because of how thoroughly and specifically the defense of you is being made. Because it is one thing to sense that the gossip about someone is not entirely fair, and another thing entirely to hear someone name every piece of that unfairness out loud with this level of precision and conviction. Does this feel like it connects to something you have been aware of, Virgo? Have you sensed that there has been someone in your orbit who has been watching this situation more carefully than they have let on, who has perhaps been quietly gathering their own understanding of what is actually true versus what has been circulated? Let me know in the comments. I want to know how this is landing for you. I want to speak to what the gossip spreader is experiencing right now, because their interior state in this moment is significant and reveals something important about the nature of what has been driving their behavior all along. They did not expect this. That is the first and most important thing to understand. Whatever calculations they made when they decided to circulate the stories they circulated about you, those calculations did not include this scenario. They accounted for certain risks, certain possible responses, certain forms of pushback, but they did not account for someone going off with this level of specificity and this level of evident conviction. And because they did not account for it, they are not prepared for it. The usual tools, the deflection, the reframing, the appeals to their own credibility and good intentions that have worked before to manage situations where their behavior was questioned are not working in this moment, because the person going off is not engaging with those tools, is not being redirected by the attempts at deflection, is not accepting the reframing. What the gossip spreader is feeling right now is something they have probably not felt often in relation to the situations they manufacture. They are feeling exposed not in the abstract theoretical way of knowing that their behavior is not above board, in the visceral, in the moment way of having their actual behavior laid out in front of people they have been performing for without the ability to control the narrative around it. This is new for them, and it is uncomfortable in a way that goes all the way down. Inhale. I want to speak to what this moment means for your reputation and for the way people in this social world perceive you, because ultimately that is one of the most practically significant aspects of what is happening. For a while, the narrative about you in certain circles has been shaped, at least in part, by what this person has been saying. Even if most people did not fully believe the worst of it, even if many of them applied some natural skepticism to what was being circulated, the narrative still had an effect. It created a slight shadow, a small but real degree of uncertainty in the minds of people who might otherwise have simply trusted their own direct experience of you. That shadow is lifting. The person going off is not just defending you in an emotional sense. They are doing something with real practical consequences. They are actively dismantling the credibility of the person who has been spreading these stories in front of the very audience that has been their primary listener. They are replacing the narrative that has been circulating with a different one, a more accurate one that is backed not just by feeling, but by the specific observations and evidence that this person has been quietly accumulating. The people listening to this are recalibrating. I feel that very clearly. Something is being recalibrated in how they understand you, how they understand the gossip spreader, and how they understand the situation that has been playing out in their shared social world. This recalibration is happening in real time as this person continues to speak, and it does not require your direct participation. It is happening on your behalf, carried by someone who has decided that the truth about you deserves to be stated clearly. I want to address something that I feel might be present in your energy right now as you receive this, which is a complicated mixture of feelings about the situation. There might be relief. The specific exhaling quality of relief that comes from having something that has been a source of quiet pain, the knowledge that your name was being misused in your absence finally being addressed, the validation of having the truth emerge without you having to fight for it yourself. There might also be something more complicated than simple relief, perhaps a kind of tiredness. The tiredness of someone who has been navigating the effects of this gossip for a while now, and who, even in the midst of things turning in their favor, is aware of the energy that this entire situation has cost them. That tiredness is valid. The fact that things are now moving toward resolution does not retroactively make the experience of being on the receiving end of dishonest gossip easy or painless. There might also be curiosity about exactly what is being said, about who is saying it and who is listening, about how this is going to settle once the immediate intensity of this going off moment passes. All of these feelings can exist simultaneously. You do not have to pick one. Let me speak now to what happens after this moment, because the immediate drama of someone going off eventually settles, and what it settles into matters as much as the moment itself. The people who witness this are going to carry what they heard. They are not going to simply forget it and return to the previous understanding of the situation as though this confrontation never happened. Something has been said that cannot be unsaid. A perspective has been offered that cannot be unheard, and it is a perspective that aligns more accurately than the gossip did with the reality of who you are. This means that in the social world where this has occurred, there is going to be a shift in how people engage with you. Perhaps not immediately, dramatically, perhaps not in ways that you will notice right away in specific, obvious behaviors, but in the accumulating way that shifts in perception tend to express themselves. Slightly warmer interactions, a different quality of attention, people giving you the benefit of the doubt in situations where before they might have unconsciously applied the slight shadow of the narrative that had been circulating. The gossip spreader, meanwhile, is going to find that their usual tools of social navigation have become less effective. Their credibility has taken a hit that they are not going to be able to quickly repair, especially not in the circles where this confrontation occurred. The audience they relied on is now seeing them differently. And that different seeing changes the landscape in which they operate. Virgo, I want to speak to something about your own role in what is unfolded, because I think it contains something worth recognizing. You did not orchestrate this. You did not plan this confrontation or engineer it or do anything to specifically bring it about. You simply continued being who you are, living according to your values, treating people with the integrity that is your natural way of operating, and the truth of who you are created its own defense in the form of a person who knew enough about you to stand up and speak when the moment arrived. This is significant because it tells you something about the kind of presence you create in people who genuinely know you. You inspire loyalty, not the performative kind that exists only when it is convenient, but the real kind, the kind that is willing to spend its own social capital to stand up for you in a moment when standing up is not the easiest or most comfortable thing to do. That is not something everyone has. That is something that comes from the specific quality of how you engage with the people in your life, from the depth and the authenticity and the genuine care that you bring to your connections, from being consistently someone worth knowing and worth defending. As I bring this reading toward its close, I want to leave you with the piece of this that I feel matters most in the larger arc of what this moment represents. Truth is patient. It does not always move on the schedule you would prefer. It does not always surface in the way or at the time that you would choose if the choice were yours. But it surfaces. Given enough time, given enough people who actually see clearly, given the right moment of pressure, truth finds its way out. It always does. What is happening right now with this person going off, with the shock of people witnessing it, with the gossip spreader being exposed in a way they never anticipated, this is truth surfacing. Your truth. The truth of who you actually are. Reclaiming the space in people's perception that the gossip had temporarily occupied. You did not have to fight for this. It was always true. It has always been true. And the people who needed to see it have now seen it thanks to someone who cared enough about the truth to say it clearly, loudly, and completely. That is what loyalty looks like when it is real. And you, Virgo, have the kind of character that earns that kind of loyalty. Let that settle. Let it be what it is. A moment of vindication that arrived on its own schedule, in its own form, carried by someone who had simply seen enough to finally speak. If this reading touched something real in you today, please share it with a Virgo who needs to hear this. And leave me a comment below. Tell me how this landed. Tell me if you have felt this dynamic happening in your life, even before this reading named it so specifically. I read every single word you share. Every story matters to me, and I carry your energy with care long after this video ends. Until next time, Virgo. Your truth does not need your defense when your character has already built one. And it just did exactly that.